And I call the member for Grey.
Speaker, I rise to raise my grievance in relation to a range of issues impacting my constituents in the seat of Grey, and more broadly, Australians living in regional and rural remote Australia, who are being left behind by an increasingly city-centric Albanese Labor government. A government who appears to think that those living in regional Australia don't deserve the same services, attention or compassion as their city-dwelling counterparts. This is a government that constantly talks about fairness, about equity, about leaving no Australian behind. But I say, look at regional South Australia, look at the electorate of Grey, at rural and remote Australia, and tell me where the equity is. Tell me where the compassion is. Now, I understand as well as anyone that it's hard to get out to the regions. In the last few weeks alone, I've driven thousands and thousands of kilometres, traversing the vast distances and the communities in the electorate of Grey. It's not easy, it requires commitment. So you can appreciate my astonishment after months of trying to get senior ministers, or maybe even the Prime Minister, to come and see firsthand the damage done by the harmful algal bloom on the Yorke Peninsula and in the Gulf of St Vincent, a genuine crisis that crippled our local aquaculture industry and destroyed livelihoods. The request was met with a resounding, patronising silence. It was all too hard. The same for the drought, the worst in history for many of my farming communities. But then, at the drop of a perfectly staged and brand new photo op with a hard hat, 3 federal Labor ministers are suddenly able to travel to the middle of South Australia, 570 kilometres north of Adelaide, for a nothing announcement at BHP's Olympic Dam mine. All the people of Grey, all the local aquaculture industry wanted was somebody to talk to, somebody to listen to their stories, but it was all too hard. Yet, when BHP had something to say, and when the Premier of South Australia wants to add some meat to his advertiser puff piece, no less than 3 Albanese Labor government ministers are able to don their fake high-vis hats and make the trek. When the real people want to talk, it's all too hard. But for the corporate photo opportunities, this government will, and I quote the great Scottish band The Proclaimers, walk 500 miles. But the neglect goes far deeper than a simple refusal to travel and hear directly from those in need. The neglect extends to not allowing older Australians living in rural and remote Australia access to essential care services when they're at their most vulnerable. The most profound crisis facing our communities today is the slow, agonising collapse of the aged care industry in the bush. The Albanese Labor government champions its aged care reforms, but those reforms feel hollow when all they deliver in my electorate is delay after delay after delay. It is heartbreaking. I'd like to now read some real stories from people in Grey who have been directly impacted. I'd like to thank these people and their families for sharing. Suzanne, 77, from Murray. Suzanne's husband Ron passed away. He suffered from bowel cancer, diabetes and heart problems. He'd been assessed for a home care package, waited over 12 months and did not receive it before his death. Suzanne is currently having difficulties with the care she is receiving due to living remotely. Quote, I had to have our bathroom renovated to put in a shower as the shower was over the bath and Ron could not step into the bath. That cost us $11,000 with no assistance. I sometimes wish I had never got a home care package because instead of helping me, it has caused me more stress and inconvenience. End quote. Janine, 71, Wallaroo. Janine suffers from inductible laryngeal obstruction, which has no cure. She was forced to retire 4 years ago because of her condition, ending her 50-year nursing career. Janine decided she needed help back in May 2024, was approved for support but was told there were no packages. Quote, this is a very debilitating and insidious condition which has changed my life completely. I'm now at the point where I need a level 1 package, but I've been told that I won't get one because they are not giving them out. My daughter has taken over the role as carer because I get overwhelmed with the system and I can't talk after a short period of time. End quote. Judith, 73, Edithburg. Judith looks after her 99-year-old mother while they waited for her to be reassessed. Her mother is currently on a level 3 home care package after suffering from a stroke a few years ago. Judith asked for her mother to be reassessed 18 months ago and is still waiting. Quote, her health has deteriorated to a point where she needs sharing and help with her ablutions. I am her daughter and I do not have a problem with this, but it means I can no longer lead a normal life. I am worried that she will die before she is reassessed. End quote. In total, more than 230,000 older Australians have been left stuck in limbo waiting for access to home care support under Labor. Now imagine being one of those people waiting, but being over 2 hours' drive from the nearest critical care facility, physio, OT, GP or mental health service. Across the electorate of Grey, families are facing impossible choices and heartbreaking situations due to the government's failure to deliver promised care. Last week, I had the privilege of joining my federal colleague, Shadow Minister, Senator Anne Ruston, in a public forum in Peterborough. We sat with local carers, with family members and with the residents themselves, and the stories we heard, both raw and devastating, proved beyond any doubt that we're in the midst of an aged care crisis. This is the price of Labor's centralisation and their one-size-approach-fits-all policy. Where is the compassion for the spouse who can no longer visit their partner daily because a round trip is 400 kilometres? Where is the plan to ensure that a retired farmer in the far north or a beloved community volunteer on the west coast can age with dignity in the town they love? This government's failure to deliver adequate aged care in regional Australia is a betrayal of trust and shows a shocking lack of foresight. And while they ignore the critical need for care, they are actively crippling the ability for our people to earn. The cost of living is spiralling out of control, and nowhere is this felt more acutely or is more dangerous than in regional Australia. We cannot absorb these sustained price hikes like the city can. I want to talk specifically about power prices and the government's utter failure to manage energy policy. For our primary producers, for our regional industries, for the small businesses that underpin regional towns in rural and remote SA, these rising energy bills are an existential threat. For the city customer, a price hike means less money for dinner out. For a South Australian steelworker, a horticulturalist, a manufacturer, a dairy producer or a meat producer, a power price hike is the difference between survival and bankruptcy. This isn't just about turning on a light switch, it's about running vital, non-negotiable equipment. This is about operating the cold storage and the refrigeration needed to keep dairy, meat and vegetables fresh for transport. This is about powering the local processing plants and the heavy industry sites that are the only major employers in Whyalla and Port Pirie. This government promised a transition to cheap, reliable energy. What they have delivered is one of the most volatile and unstable energy markets in the developed world. I would like to remind Australians that much of our prosperity and economic growth of the 70s, 80s and 90s and the wealthy lifestyles that middle and older Australians enjoy today is because we had cheap power, because our primary industries could compete, because we could afford to make and to do things. Mr Speaker, there's a healthy debate happening around the economic impacts of net zero. Well, Speaker, I know one way we can get to net zero. We close all of our manufacturing industries and send it to China, and we make farming so unviable that we stop producing Australian-made food and fibre. And Speaker, this seems to be the approach of the Albanese Labor government. And finally, how can our communities hope to grow or at a bare minimum sustain themselves when the basic infrastructure that connects us is crumbling? I mentioned driving thousands of kilometres, and I've seen firsthand that the state of our roads throughout Grey, whether that be outback roads like the Strzelecki Track or the Augusta Highway, a major highway, they are appalling. They are not just inconvenient, they are dangerous, creating unacceptable risks for the businesses transporting goods, for our truck drivers moving freight, or for our families travelling between regional towns. When a regional hospital can't retain a surgeon, and the only path to major medical care is a 4-hour drive down a pothole-ridden, narrow and neglected highway, this becomes a matter of life and death. This government is failing to invest in the basic asphalt and steel that ties our nation together, just as they are failing to invest in and support the ties that bond our elderly to their family homes. In conclusion, the Albanese Labor government must stop looking at regional Australia through the lens of a staged photo opportunity or a campaign-made promise to a metropolitan demographic. We are not an afterthought, and we are not here to subsidise city convenience with our health, our livelihoods or the dignity of our elderly. The people of Grey demand attention, they demand equity, and they demand a government that will actually walk 500 miles, not just for a multinational corporation, but for the real people who need help right now. Thank you, Speaker.